Afternoon, everyone. I hate to interrupt that great music, but the hour is here to begin our Mesa City Council study session for the afternoon of December the 1st. All of our council is present. The first item on the agenda for this meeting is to review the items on the agendas for tonight's regular council meeting and also the agenda for the formal council meeting that will be held a week from tonight on December the 8th. Because we have a few different presenters for the agenda items on the December 8th meeting, let's review that agenda first before we go to tonight's agenda. So council, please refer to that document. I know we do have some staff presentations, but maybe before we get to that, are there any additional information that you'd like to request for any item that's on the December 8th agenda? Maybe while you're perusing that, let's go ahead and, Mr. Brady, I believe we're going to talk about a couple of agenda items, including agenda item 4K. Let's pull that up. That has to do with the HIJK. That is the studios at Mesa City Center, second guaranteed maximum price. Is staff ready to make that presentation, Mr. Brady?
Yeah, they're getting set up. I think just ready, Mayor.
Okay, great. And I know we do have some part of this presentation will be remote. We're looking forward to hearing from Jimmy Choi from ASU as well. I know is on the line. Yes. Welcome, Jimmy.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Jeff McVay with the Manager Downtown Transformation with City Manager's Office. And as you noted, you have a new Hollywood Square today. Jimmy Choi with ASU, Associate Vice President of the Knowledge Enterprise, but more importantly, as it relates to the Studios Project, the Founding Executive Director of ASU's Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute. Going back a couple of years to when we first entered into our IGA and lease agreement with ASU, there was an obligation on the city, for the city, to build out approximately 6,000 to 12,000 square feet of what we have been calling the studios at Mesa City Center, which is the city's first public library located at 59 East 1st Street, right next door to the council chambers. On your agenda for December 8th is a guaranteed maximum price number 2 of 3 GMPs for this project. That allows the early procurement and early installation of some of the critical path items for this project. And it's approximately $3.5 million. So we figured at that point you'd want to be able to see what we've been doing from a design perspective and then have a discussion about what our intent is within the building. I'm going to invite Jimmy, since Jimmy's in New York, I'm going to invite her to jump in at any point and correct me when I get things wrong, because I probably will, and she's very good at correcting me. So I want to start first, though, with an overview of the actual architecture and the changes to the building. One of the really striking features that's being added is a new enclosed lobby on the northeast corner of the building. Today, that's just an open plinth with a entryway off to the side. Much like other projects, though, we're also thinking about this and how it's going to look at the evening. By enclosing that lobby, it really gives us the ability to do some striking lighting and really create a beacon for people as they're going by. The picture on the right is actually our architects, Gensler, who worked on who's designed this project for us. They came out one evening and did a mock-up of how some of this lighting could look with the very unique what we call the M block, but it's the block that's on the outside of the building to shade the windows. In addition, we've done the exterior. The modifications include a new reimagined wavy canopy. If everybody remembers, this building used to have 2 concrete wavy canopies that were really part of the historic architectural features. However, based off of the size and location of the ASU building, those canopies could not actually continue to exist as they were configured. So we reimagined those and created a new entry feature on the backside that creates a great connection to the ASU building just to the south. In addition, not shown here, but very, very small little corner on the corner here. It's hard to make out. I could give a better picture if council's interested, but we have a concept for how we're reusing some remnant pieces of that original wavy canopy to create kind of an entry monument feature at the pedestrian level. Another important feature on the exterior is on the The southeast corner of the building is the creation of some new glazing. That is going to create some really good daylighting on the inside of the building with a community event room that I'll be able to highlight on a later slide. In addition, because there is going to be such a strong physical and actually programmatic relationship with the ASU building, there is a strong connection on the east side of the building that we're calling the Connector Plaza that will help draw people back and forth between the two buildings. Now, this is not the most exciting of the pages or slides I have to show you, but this is to show you that we are doing, we have designed for all 3 floors of the building. There's a basement, first floor, and second floor. The project that we have for the studios is only for a build out of the first floor, which is around 7,000 square feet. But we wanted to show and be ready for the ability to build out an additional space as funding and potentially corporate sponsorships, partnerships come into place that could help us see the full vision sooner than we have anticipated. So highlighting the first floor, really the important elements, and I've tried to include a today picture next door to each of the same spots. So the new entry lobby on that top left corner is going to be a 2-story, really nice feature. It's not only is it going to be a lobby waiting area, but it could also be a program space as well, given the size of the area. Very important to this is the ability to have larger scale community events. So just off of that entry lobby through these new glass doors is the community event room. Now that community event room can be laid out in either lecture style or classroom style. It's being designed as a very flexible space, and I should say this: the entire building is being designed as extremely flexible space that helps it to be future-proof as technologies change. One of the interesting things, and it kind of highlights in this image, as they've been doing, our contractor has been doing initial demolition in the building, they have found spaces where there is exposed brick that was covered up and that we are now going to be able to incorporate into the design that we didn't know was there. So it's going to make for even more or nicer features than we expected. In addition, on the inside, we have spaces that are set up for open collaboration. We have spaces that are set up for open individual workstations. We have spaces that are set up for informal and formal meeting areas. We have, and because the work of innovation cannot happen without food and caffeine, we had to include a break room as well. But I'll note, even the break room has been designed to be extremely flexible so that those individual tables are all movable, so you could create a large space and you could have a gathering of some type, collaborating over coffee, collaborating over snacks. So we've been thinking about that flexibility all throughout. Now that we've gone through and we tried to wow you with the nice renderings, it's important for us to wow you with what our intent is for this space and what our intent is for the program. We are partnering with ASU, but I think it's important to talk about not only what we intend to do in this space, but what this space isn't. And we want to make it very clear that this is not an extension of the classroom and the academic programming that's happening in the ASU Futures Laboratory. This is a standalone innovation and entrepreneurship studios that isn't going to benefit from the relationship to ASU, not be a extension of the ASU academic programming. Now, I will hand over to Jimmy because she can do a way better job of talking about what our intent is and what we hope to do with the program inside the building.
Thanks so much, Jeff. And again, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members for having me. Let me go back just a little bit if we could. Even before the architects ever started putting any sketching and thinking about the building, there were some core principles that we worked on very importantly, and I think in honoring what the space is intended to be. So we actually started with a vision statement in terms of what we want this space to do, and there were a few key things that we want to make sure we convey to you, I think picking off of what Jeff just said. One, that this space is really about the community. It belongs to the innovators of Mesa and fosters needed skills within an adaptable technological ecosystem. And so a few key words there. One, again, that it is for the community, it's for the innovators of Mesa. Two, that it's about adaptability and picking up on an overall ecosystem. So that was the second point in our vision overall, that we wanted to make sure that the studios will change with the community's innovation needs. that's kind of the nature of innovation, right? Today, we think we know what it might be about. We think we know what it might be about when it comes to digital media, when it comes to gaming, when it comes to esports, when it comes to making and creating in a technologically enhanced way. I mean, look at us now. We're in the Zoom setting, having this meeting in this kind of Hollywood Square setting. At a certain point, we hope in the very near future, we're all going to be comfortable being in spaces again together and being close proximity, and the idea that 9 months ago, success looked like having a community event room that had 200-300 people hanging out in there together. Right now, at the moment, it seems a little daunting, the idea of being, a couple hundred people together again. In the very near future, we hope that's going to be the case, and that kind of collision, that kind of connectivity is going to be possible. So adaptability, even before we knew about the situation right now with the pandemic, was one of the core tenets of the vision. We also wanted the best of all innovation to be able to be incubated here at the studios. And the idea that whether it's a large scale project that needs kind of more space, or whether it's, small startup companies that are just getting off the ground and really saving their hard-earned capital and saving their hard-earned revenue to be able to use it to advance their company and not having to worry about things like immediately enter into leases or insurance issues or things like that. So providing an environment where you can actually incubate new products, new services, new processes, new technology overall. Another word that Jeff said in the beginning that I think is important, and we actually had written down as part of our vision, was that we wanted this space to be a beacon. Actually had a great set of design conversations with a number of community members, a number of community-based organizations. Councilmember Duff, we were so pleased you were able to join both of them in the last couple of months. But it's one of the things that we wanted to project was that this innovation studio in the downtown innovation district now becomes a beacon, a place and a gateway for people to be able to access all of what the downtown has to offer and what the innovation district as a whole will have to offer, including the ASU academic building moving forward. But importantly, it's a component of the overall district, and the studios will serve a purposeful role, primarily in filling any gaps, providing adaptable space, connecting community-based organizations to and with each other, and then, again, providing certain things that may not be available in some of the other community-based organizations or some of the other already organizations that exist. Finally, the last few things that we articulated was that it's a place where people can connect the dots, both in terms of each other, connect the dots in terms of other organizations, connect the dots with other organizations, whether they're large-scale corporations like Boeing, or they're small, again, new startups, where there's a lot of room for possibility. And the thing that we know about innovation is that it has to be both hands-on and flexible and adaptable, and also provide for serendipity, right? So we can program, and some of the programming that we'll talk about is really centered on business development, is centered on certain technical skills, is centered on ecosystem development, is centered on ways of thinking about innovation. And in our case, we think about entrepreneurship both as a noun, but also as an adjective. How can you be entrepreneurial in the things that you're doing, the problems that you're trying to solve, the problems that you're even articulating? So having the ability to have these serendipitous connections, and then also having the diversity of not only people and users, but the diversity of the types of spaces. Jeff went through the layouts pretty quickly, but one of the things I hope you notice is that it's one, about being welcoming, two, about having people actually make decisions about how they want to use the space. So very little in terms of built-in walls, no dividing spaces, no private offices, right? No private offices for staff. The way that we plan to run this community space is run it as a community space. So we'll have a community manager that ASU will provide, will co-invest in this space. And the community manager's job is to really serve as a concierge, not only in the Mesa Innovation Studios, but as a concierge for the Innovation District as a whole. So that's our vision of the space, and I think it was important to talk a little bit about that before we talk just about the specificity, and again, of what we're hoping that the community is going to be able to do. That large-scale event space will be able to accommodate large-scale events, but also will be able to accommodate things like large-scale installations. We had a great set of conversations, Boeing as one example. They were talking about some of their public outreach programs, and while they love to have everything from K-12 programs to public engagement in scientific discourse and scientific literacy, there are times when, for example, coming to their facilities is actually a prohibitor, right? They have so much security on their site, bringing people on site to them is a little bit problematic. So we talked about what would it look like if we had an on-site installation? What would it look like if we had a flight simulation? What would it look like if we were able to deliver some of the Boeing programs or some of the Mesa Unified School District programs instead of in the individual schools in a community space like this? So those are the types of things that we're thinking about. It's similar to some of the programming we've been able to do with the City of Chandler as an example, and using the ASU Chandler Innovation Center as a way that multiple people can input and have a diversity of not only events, but a diversity of users overall. So that's just kind of, I think it was important to frame it in that way, if it's helpful for you. And one last thing that I will note, in terms of the connector plaza, Jeff is exactly right. If we look at this innovation studio, having the connectivity to the academic programs there, to some of the corporate research that's going to be happening there, to some of the program partners we're going to have there, we really would like to see some of those outputs of the university then become inputs into the studios. So that means having the student talent and having the student personnel, having the faculty expertise, having the ability to create some porosity between the two, while also being very distinct about the fact that the Mesa Innovation Studios, again, is meant to be a benefit to the community and is meant to take full advantage of everything that ASU has to offer, and not ASU taking advantage of the Mesa Innovation Studios, if that makes sense. One last note I wanted to make even about the space itself. We were very specific about the design choices. You know, the last thing we want to do is have some fancy design space with, chairs that are so expensive that it could fund an entire startup for a year. So we were very conscientious about all of the choices we made there, and we made those choices with Gensler together, and then also based on feedback with some of the design sessions we had with the community overall. And then, of course, Chris Brady and Jeff and others were very careful about, what's necessary to really bring the space to life, but also prudent and is economically and fiscally responsible of us in terms of the making best use of this kind of space. So I just wanted to frame some remarks that way. Again, hopefully that's helpful.
And Mayor, from a timing perspective, this is, again, the second of the 3 GMPs. The third GMP is anticipated to come before council after the first of the year, and that'll be for the primary construction activities that will take around 10 months. So we're looking at the project being completed towards the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. So this will be, the plaza will be finished first, followed by the studios, and then followed by the ASU building. So we'll have quite the run of groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings coming up in the next year.
Thank you, Jeff. Maybe to that point of the timing, when will ASU start helping us to activate that building, and when will we have the people of Mesa utilizing it? Will we do that prior to the ribbon cutting of the academic building, or will we kind of wait for them to come online together?
So Mayor, Jimmy and I are actually working on our formal licensing agreement between ASU and the city. We hope to have that to you after the first of the year. That will lay out the actual formal arrangement and timing. Our anticipation, though, is that we'd like to get programming started here as soon as possible. And if that's in advance of the academic programs, all the better, because we'd like to start activating the space as soon as we can.
And to add to that, if I may, we have actually, especially over the last year or two, started doing a lot of the community outreach. Many of the community-based organizations, many of the personnel, many of the leaders in Mesa are known to us. We've participated over the past couple of years in doing things like Global Entrepreneurship Week. There was another event just a couple of weeks ago that was part of Global Entrepreneurship Week. And so connecting to the community and starting to do certain events, working with people like Pam Slim and the K Main Street Learning Lab, working with Augie Gastelum, with Creative Catalyst, with the Mesa Arts Center. We've started much of that work already, and we'd like to be able to do that organically, so by the time the building is actually open, we have a nice pipeline of not only relationships, but also events that are programmed and planned out, leaving enough room, of course, for the community to come in and also make some decisions about what they'd like to see. But we don't see it as dependent on timing it with the academic building.
Okay, thank you. I'm Councilmember Duff.
Yeah, so just so I can understand better, the build out of the studios still need to be done, and the anticipation of that completion is spring, did you say, or of 21? I'm a little unclear.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, we are anticipating December of 2021 to January of 2022, somewhere in that range.
Okay, that's near the time of ASU's academic building being complete, is that correct?
The city will be complete with our activities on the ASU building in time for at the end of 2021, where we'll hand it over to ASU for their build out, which is anticipated to take several months. They're going to start bringing academic programs in at the earliest possible time that they can, but that still is kind of up in the air as to when they can start the full academic programming. We know that there'll be some summer programming for sure.
But it will be after, it'll be months after this is open, to be clear. So that, because once the building is built, then ASU has to bring in all the equipment and furniture, so that'll take some time. But, so this will be, think about this at the beginning of 2022, and the ASU building actually closer to the summer, May timeframe of that same year. So it could be, 5 or 6 months between the opening of this and the ASU building ribbon cutting.
And the plaza?
Plaza would
November
be,
of 20.
we have to have it open for the ice skating rink for Mary Main Street a year from now. So its ribbon cutting, we would anticipate would be the Friday after next year's Thanksgiving.
So the plaza, winter of 21, we're starting 21. Winter of 21, the studios like the spring of 22, and the academic building hopefully by fall of 22.
Oh, yeah, probably before then, yeah. But that's pretty close,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, great. And how is the programming handled for the studios? Is that scheduled and structured and monitored by ASU or the city, or what entity is overlooking that?
We anticipate it will be by ASU, and that we would, one, deliver some of our own programmings. As part of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute, we have a fairly robust catalog overall of different workshops, seminars, boot camps. We facilitate a number of sessions already. We have a robust mentors network. We'd like to add to that mentors network with mentors from the city of Mesa. But right now we have, I think, 60 venture mentors that work with a number of individual teams and individual startup companies. So we would imagine then some of that activity starting to happen in the city of Mesa with the city of Mesa. And then certainly what we would be looking for then is that continued input. So we would have a reservation system to be able to use the event space. We would cross-promote events together. We would co-host events together. So I think it would be ASU. We're imagining that it would be E&I and our team that would be managing that programming.
So, Mayor and Council, this ASU's role in the studios is part of the obligations, if you would, for consideration of the city's commitment to build out the ASU academic building. So part of that discussion or the agreement is that in part of the consideration is that ASU would take on the responsibility to program and manage the space for the community, but that they would do that without charge back to the city.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, if we remember back to the lease agreement, ASU actually has, what we're considering the minimum requirements of ASU as it relates to the studio, they have obligations to provide a minimum of 45 public events per year, either at the studios or within the ASU building, or even in the plaza, depending on whether it's a film festival or something like that. So entrepreneurship and innovation events, 20 of those, I believe, a year, and 25 film-related events per year is what we are considering the baseline obligations of ASU. What Jimmy and I have been talking about and what we are focusing more on are what we consider the more entrepreneurship and innovation-related programming, mentorships, things like that Jimmy has been describing, in addition to those minimum requirements.
And one more question. So I assume, is there a fee schedule to use the space, or is that filtered by ASU as far as who uses it and how they use it?
At the moment, we're not anticipating any chargebacks. It depends on as we get things operating and going. At the maximum, what we would imagine at the moment is if there was any direct use issues, if on a Saturday night we had to bring in an extra cleaning crew or something like that. But primarily, again, we see this as an investment that's already been made by the city, and then a co-investment that's made by ASU to program and operate it. We wouldn't imagine it turning into a revenue generation stream for the city of Mesa. That's not the way we envisioned it and we designed it. We would like it to be obviously revenue neutral in terms of just the operation of it overall. But we're seeing that, and that's part of the discussion we're having right now in terms of the finalization of what's called the license agreement. But no, we wouldn't imagine it. This is one of the things we'd like to see, is that there's no barriers to entry, really, right? An ability to have a community managed space, have a really nice space like this event space, and then remove barriers of things like rent deal or facilities fees. But some of that I think we'll just have to see in terms of what the wear and tear and the usage of the building looks like overall. And certainly what we would hope to see is that, as we bring in things like corporate sponsors and corporate partners, that they're able to contribute to the maintenance and upkeep of a space like this. And certainly what we'd love to see, especially for the build out of the second floor and then also for the basement, as we look at specialized uses.
And Mayor, Councilmember Duff, I think I completely agree with Jimmy. One thing, though, I would like to note is that we may, though, still have to have some level of membership because there could be, innovation happens at all hours, and ASU is not going to staff this building after 5 p.m. And so there could be memberships in which they are granted access off hours to be able to use the open workspaces that are going to be included in the building. So we may have to have some tiers built into it, but we aren't looking at a revenue structure.
And if I could add one more thing, what we also don't want to do is we don't want to be competing with some of the co-working companies, whether it's a Cahoots or whether it's any others coming in. What we would imagine this space is, it's that, right? Pre-revenue generation, So the idea would be, how do we help get people off the ground? How do we get them into a firm business model? How do we get them into a place where they are actually able to generate revenue, where they are looking at investment, and then they're able to spend that money and actually be able to afford not only paying rents, they might move into a paid co-working type of space. They might move into a paid shared office type of facility before they enter into a single proprietary lease type of situation. But ideally, again, this is where they get their start. This is where they get the chance to build up the model, understand what they're working on, and then as they're generating revenue, be able to give to the community and contribute to the overall community and the tax base of Mesa, but without that barrier to begin.
Okay, so the city is going to bear the overhead and maintenance and let's say the electricity and the cleaning and, all these kinds of things. And then ASU, I assume, is doing more of the personnel and programming.
That's right. ASU is going to provide all of the community managers, the facilitators, the instructors, the workshop facilitators, in addition to the community provided as well, right? So if the Mesa Arts Center wants to run Creative Catalyst out of that space, or if we have Main Street Learning Labs and they want to host certain facilities or certain events at the facilities, we would imagine that as well. But yes, ASU would provide the community manager, the personnel, the facilitators, all of the event management as well.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, I think important clarification, though, is that we have two sides of the operations and maintenance. There's the operations side, which is the ongoing day-to-day costs. Those things like electricity and cleaning, those will be covered by ASU. The maintenance side, almost as a landlord-tenant relationship, will be covered by the city. So the building maintenance, systems maintenance, things like those will be covered by the city.
Great. I'm very excited about this programming. I think it's exactly what we need in building the innovation district, and I think it'll have a tremendous effect and be so beneficial and for Mesa as a whole. I'm very proud of the work we've done to pull this together, and thank you for your commitment to the programming of this. Thank you.
Thank you. I know, I believe Vice Mayor Freeman, did you have a comment, a question?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go back a few years. I think this building was built in 1960. What is it, Jeff? Can you tell me? 63 or 4?
Vice Mayor, 1959.
Oh, dang, I'm off a few years. Well, I remember going there as a little guy and going to the library, and I thought it was the coolest thing that Mesa ever built. The library was spectacular. I went there, obviously, for a number of years until it was built out to something else. But so I appreciate the architecture component, keeping some of that established history within our community. Our historical preservation for some of these buildings, I think, is important. Well, I know it's important, and I'm excited to see, as an older person now, see the renovation inside the refurbishment of this building. I think it'll be spectacular just from the renderings that I saw. Jimmy, thank you. I think 2.5 years ago, you took us on a trip to New York, and we experienced the New York University, NYU, and some of the innovations there in the buildings. It was pretty phenomenal. to see the, I'll just say the innovation and everything that you've talked about. So this will be similar, but yet it's way more advanced now today than 2.5 years ago. So
That's what we're hoping to see, leapfrogging. We've learned already, and we can leapfrog right over some things that have happened, yes.
So seeing the young people, entrepreneurs and others there starting their businesses and learning, I think is a great asset to this, what we're trying to do there. I guess I have a question too. Has there been any corporate inquiries about sponsorship or helping out with any of the programming or build outs there currently?
We've had some discussions, but frankly, right when some of the discussions were happening, it was also the time of COVID-19. So one of the things that we're trying to do now is really think about, one, first of all, how do we activate the space? And I think we'll have enough time between now and December 2021, which is when we anticipate the studios being available. There's been a few specific conversations. I'm not at liberty at the moment to disclose because we haven't come to any terms on that. Our hope is, again, certainly to have certain corporate partners, if they're not exclusive use of the space, but really sponsoring the idea of bringing certain features to the studios as a whole. And we will continue that work.
Good. The only comment I make suggestion-wise is in some of our neighborhoods, meeting space is a premium, and there's not enough room or meeting space to host a neighborhood get-together. Well, I say if you want to have a neighborhood meeting, especially with COVID or other pandemic issues, to be able to spread out. So I'd hope that some component addresses neighborhoods to come in and utilize the facility for their needs too, because this is a community, built by the city, and trying to allow them to have some space, because for some of my district, that's one of the things we struggle with, is having enough open area to meet and social distance today. So with that, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Luna.
Thank you, Jeff and Dr. Choi, for that wonderful presentation. It sort of reminds me of the amalgamation of NYU and SkySong. It's a Center for Innovation Development, which to me is very exciting. I'm really excited that you're partnering with Mesa Public Schools. I know there are many students interested in developing their entrepreneurship skills. This is a vehicle for them to do that. It's a space that they can go ahead and achieve that with support of ASU and other organizations. To me, is very exciting. And it's really going to be a real centerpiece of the downtown area for creativity and this innovation. So first of all, thank you for coming to the city of Mesa. I'm excited to see what blossoms from this. But I'm also, one of the things I did want to mention is the community space too is a premium here in the city of Mesa. And I appreciate that you're going to allow that, and you're going to foster community development to go into that space to see what comes out of it. And I know a lot of great things are going to blossom as a result of that. So thank you. And I look forward to seeing, participating and seeing it all happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Councilmember Luna, thank you. If I may, it's less about even allowing, and it's more about welcoming. We really welcome the idea of community users and wanting them to activate the space together. And I couldn't agree with you more about the youth entrepreneurship programs. It's one of the more successful programs we've been able to launch with the Institute. So we are looking to leverage one of the things we've learned. We currently have a national middle schools youth entrepreneurship program, and it's sponsored by the Verizon Foundation, and it's centered on digital literacy. So the idea of how do you get young people to not be just consumers of media and technology, but to be creators and purveyors and decision makers about what it's actually used for. So the program is centered on digital literacy, entrepreneurial thinking, design thinking, and then sustainability. So we're hoping to leverage some of that. And in some of the early conversations we've had so far, the idea is like, what can we do to replicate and bring some of the curriculum we've created and have it now implemented in the space? One other thing I wanted to mention, we've had a great success working with what's called an entrepreneurship outreach network. It's working with public libraries so that they could activate their spaces and bring in a number of programs that are entrepreneurial and focus and bring it to the libraries, and then vice versa, work with the library patrons, including families, to bring in to spaces like this and to be able to experience it in a different way. So there was a member from the Mesa Libraries that was in one of our design sessions recently as well. And we're excited to be able to do things like they don't have certain softwares that are available at the library. Could we make that available at the workstations we'll have at the innovation studios? And so that's already an active discussion.
Thank you. Council, other comments on this agenda item? Again, this is just a preview of what our agenda is going to be on our agenda a week from tonight. I want to thank Jeff and Jimmy for the presentation. I'll harken back to something Mr. Freeman said a little while ago. For those of us that grew up in Mesa, this building is a very loved building. I mean, this really was one of the best places in the city of Mesa while we were growing up, and there's a lot of happy memories for people of our generation attached to this building. And so it's been painful, frankly, for the last couple of decades to drive by this building and say it was being utilized as essentially a data center, as a tech building. But the bones were so beautiful. You know, it was just always broke my heart that the public wasn't getting a chance to get in and experience this building the way that a lot of us did in our childhood. So I'm very excited to see this building be activated and come back into circulation in the community. As was indicated earlier, the people that are going to use this building are the people of Mesa. They're the users, and we are very fortunate to have a partnership with ASU where ASU is going to bring all of their expertise and talents and resources to this building so that they can be a blessing to the people of Mesa, Arizona. And a lot of people are really going to be very positively impacted by this building. So very excited. Thank you again to ASU for your collaboration on this project. And we'll look forward to this being on our agenda a week from tonight.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thanks. Mr. Brady, I think we also have a staff presentation on agenda item 4I. Is that correct? Having to do with the library?
That is correct, Mayor. Just give us a second.
Should I excuse myself from the rest of the meeting?
Thank you.
Yes, Jimmy, I'm sorry. I should have.
No, that's okay. I just didn't want to leave suddenly and realize.
No.
Thank you again for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I believe we're welcoming,
They'll have Heather Wolf here and Beth Uning.
okay. Wow, okay, Heather and Beth,
Good evening.
two of our favorites. Welcome.
Oh, well,
Hey,
thank you.
yay. And if you think the other library was amazing, wait till Heather shows you what she's going to show you.
Yes, we're very excited to take a few minutes of your time tonight and talk about the project that is on the agenda for December 8th. It is funded by the 2018 voter-approved Arts and Culture Bond. So we had a lot of talk tonight about our previous library building. So we moved to this current location, basically across the street in 1981. And originally, the first floor was devoted to the library. The second floor housed city departments. So HR, if you went to HR back then, you went to the second floor of the current main library building. Those departments moved out, and in 1998, the library expanded to all, both floors. And during that renovation process, the children's area and the teen area actually did not grow. We grew the adult areas, but we did not grow the children's and teen areas. So in the 22 years since then, we've realized we really need to expand that area and devote more space to our very important community members, our children. And so in 2018, we were able to add our teen zone, which allowed us to move our young adult materials and activities out of the children's area and grow a little bit. But this project will allow us to expand the space considerably. So the orange box on your screen shows where the construction actually happens, but I want to emphasize that when we are done with the construction, the children's area will actually take up pretty much 50% of the first floor. We've moved all of the adult computers out upstairs to the second floor, and so the vast majority of activities on the first floor will be children's or teen related, and then of course our Think Spot. There will be some demolition. We're eliminating a couple of walls. First off, to create a child-sized entry, so there will be 2 entries to the space. And then we're going to eliminate a few walls in our programming area and redesign them in order to make that space much more flexible. What we thought would work in 1998 we can do better, and we're excited. We're also taking advantage of the project to update our children's restrooms. We're going to turn them into actual family restrooms, which will be much more convenient for those family members who have younger children. We are moving the majority of the shelves out of the area where the public computers used to be, and this will allow us to enhance the flow and create a more open and bright space for our children. With more space, we can also create zones which are appropriate to different age groups, and we're targeting for this area infants all the way up to our tween group. So this is a conceptual drawing of the new entrance to the children's space. We have not finalized the artwork for the space, but we wanted to show you the vision. The theme for the new space is Arizona and its amazing animals. And so the entrances are designed to look as though you're entering a mine with rocks and timbers around the openings. We really wanted to create a feeling for that the child is going someplace unique and special when they walk through the entrance. And you can see we have the child-sized on the left, and then our current entrance will remain for adults who maybe can't fit through that space or have strollers or other wheelchairs, whatever, and need more space to come into the room. We are also planning to use animal tracks as a wayfinding device. This will work well for children who cannot read or who are learning to read. And here are two of our zones that we'll be creating and how the animal tracks will lead you to these spaces. And again, the artwork is not final, and we plan to work with Arizona Game and Fish and local experts to ensure that any depictions of an animal or its habitat are accurate. We want to make sure the kids are seeing what they would see if they were able to see these animals out in the wild. And this area, the Mexican gray wolf area, is our digital literacy zone, and it will be located on either side of the entrance. With the remodel, we plan to pair each early literacy computer with an adult computer, and we're doing this to encourage parents to sit side by side with their children and interact with their children while they are learning how to use the early literacy stations. Our Roadrunner tracks will lead you to the baby toddler area. There will be low seating for parents as well as soft surfaces, and we're also kind of enclosing the space a little bit, and this is all designed to keep our youngest visitors safe within the larger space. And in our back corner, there will be an area for pop-up story times. And it'll have multiple levels so that children can still see the presenter up at the top level. And that's just a brief highlight, and I'm going to turn it over to Beth.
And so tonight, what we're asking for approval is for the construction contract to start this work in the amounts shown. We do plan to start construction in January if approved tonight and be done by the end of May so that we can do some summer reading, I believe, right, Heather, this summer in this area. So that's what we'd like to go forward with tonight, pending your approval.
Thank you, Heather and Beth. I have a quick question. Heather, you mentioned the use of computers, and there would be adults sitting next to kind of learning with their children or going through some of the early literacy computer programming with their children. Is that correct?
That is correct. So it won't be a computer like the ones upstairs on the second floor. It will be specifically for parents or caregivers to be using while their children are on the computer next to them.
Got it. And so that the adult, the computers that are there for the general public would be on the second floor, on a separate floor from this facility, correct?
Yes, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Council, other questions on this agenda item? Again, this is on our agenda for a week from tonight on our formal council agenda. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. Heather and Beth, on the graphics indicating your zones, excuse me, the Mexican gray wolf, why was that chosen? Why not a deer or an elk or a javelina or a coyote?
So, Vice Mayor and Council, so we selected animals that are specific to Arizona, although I do realize the Mexican gray wolf does have a habitat in Mexico, but we were trying to find ones that were more, whereas coyotes can be in California, Texas, those sorts of areas. So we were trying to focus, like in our pop-up story of time area, it looks like the Grand Canyon, so we've selected the bighorn sheep for that. We do have some reading nooks. Because of the den-like atmosphere, we went with the bear for that one. Roadrunner was selected because it's a small animal for the baby toddler area. So that's kind of what our thinking was.
I get that, but you know, the Mexican gray wolf hasn't been in Arizona for decades and for over 100 years. So I'd still challenge you to maybe look at another animal for an exhibit. Personally, I don't. The Mexican gray wolf is quite a controversial animal in a lot of parts of the western states. So I don't want to create some controversy where I could look at a nice quail bird or a javelina, deer, elk. You know, you have probably a 0.03% of ever seen a Mexican gray wolf in the wild, where you can see an elk or deer pretty much common. So I challenge you to find something that's more common in our southwestern Arizona versus that animal. And that's my only comment. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Council, other comments on this agenda item? I'll just add another a compliment. I think we are all anxious for the Mesa General Library to have a very welcoming atmosphere for children and families, and so I think this will help improve that. And I don't know, Heather or Beth, if maybe you could comment on that. But I certainly remains a public library, and so adults will be coming to the library, you know, for a variety of reasons. But how will these improvements kind of, you know, make this kind of help to insulate, you know, the young families and the children from the users, you know, the more mainstream users in other parts of the library?
So, Mayor, with this reconfiguration of the library, as I said, we've already moved all of the public computers upstairs to the second floor. So the only things remaining on the first floor for the general population would be the main desk, which is right by the entrance when you come in. So we can direct people upstairs or to ThinkSpot, for example, if they're looking for those things. The holds are the only other thing that are that somebody would be coming in to grab quickly and check out. The rest of the activities, this children's space, the teen zone, are definitely oriented for children and families. ThinkSpot, we might have some solo adults coming, but they are coming for a very specific purpose, usually by appointment in order to use equipment.
Okay. Thank you. I think it will really make for a more inviting and non-intimidating atmosphere for young children and families to be attracted to the library. So I'm very supportive of these improvements. Council, any other questions on this agenda item? Okay, Council, any other questions for any item or any additional information you'd like for anything appearing on the December 8th agenda? Again, we're going over that meeting today because we likely won't have another opportunity to look at that before a week from tonight. Councilmember Duff.
Yes, are we going to have a presentation or discussion on item 6B regarding the marijuana prohibitions? I know the introduction is on today's agenda and the vote is next Tuesday, but I was looking for an opportunity to discuss it.
Yes, thank you very much. I should have clarified you. That is the public hearing on that agenda item is a week from tonight, but the introduction is tonight. So we do have a staff presentation planned for that agenda item when we go over the agenda for tonight's meeting. Okay, having made that clarification, Council, any other questions relating to the December 8th agenda? All right, seeing none, let's now shift to tonight's agenda. I know we do, as we discussed a moment ago from Councilmember Duff's question, we do have a staff presentation on agenda item 6B. That is the recreational marijuana code adjustments. So why don't we just jump into that, because I know time is a little bit of a premium tonight. So Mr. Brady, let's go ahead and jump to agenda item 6B and get the staff presentation on that.
Yeah, just a reminder, Council. Now we're back to now we're on the today's agenda. So we have a whole panel of presenters here. So I think Mr. Pombier is going to start it off.
Mayor, Council, it's our pleasure tonight to talk to you about recreational marijuana and how we plan to introduce the ordinance to help us manage that new opportunity within the state of Arizona. I have with me today Assistant Chief Lee Rankin and Jeff Balin. He's a legal advisor to the police department who now works in the city attorney's office. I wanted to start out by letting you know that the reality of this situation is this Proposition 207 contemplated local jurisdictions to regulate the introduction of recreational marijuana into our community. What we are doing here tonight is working with the league and their recommended legislation. We're working with other cities to make sure we do this in a uniform format across the valley. As a matter of fact, an ordinance very similar to what you're going to see here introduced here today has already been approved in Scottsdale and Gilbert. And so what we're doing tonight is giving you kind of a snapshot of lessons learned from other jurisdictions and how we can introduce this new proposition into our community in the most effective and least costly manner. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief Rankin and let him run with it, but I wanted you to understand how positive we believe this step is and how we're going lockstep with the rest of the valley to make sure we do this in a uniform measure.
So good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. I'm going to jump right into it. The purpose of this presentation is to discuss the proposed recreational marijuana ordinance and to seek its adoption. The new law allows cities to enact reasonable regulations, including limitations on recreational marijuana retail establishments, marijuana testing facilities, delivery of recreational marijuana, and possession of recreational marijuana on property that is occupied, owned, controlled, and operated by the city. Given the slim margin which defeated the marijuana proposition in 2016, like many, the Mesa Police Department anticipated the passage of Prop 207. As such, our members traveled to Denver and met with officials of the Denver Police Department to gain a better understanding of the public safety challenges related to the recreational marijuana industry. Based on those findings, we have worked with the city attorney's office, our legal advisor, to help craft reasonable regulations which are allowable under the provisions set forth in this proposition. Our goal is to ensure the health, the welfare, and the safety of our residents, as well as the public safety personnel who respond to calls for service every day. The proposed ordinance seeks to implement several allowances, again, provided to cities and towns in Prop 207. The proposed ordinance seeks to allow recreational marijuana establishments only as a dual license with medical marijuana establishments. In the next slide, we'll examine the rationale for exercising the dual license option. Furthermore, the ordinance will regulate the consumption of edibles and vaping on city property and restrict the delivery of recreational marijuana. Our interest in regulating the consumption of edibles in public places such as parks is to preserve the family-friendly environment and ensure that our parks continue to be a safe destination for our children. This map depicts the 13 medical marijuana dispensaries that are currently located in Mesa. These facilities are limited to light and general industrial areas. Dispensaries must be 5,280 feet from other dispensaries, 2,400 feet from treatment and transitional home facilities, 1,200 feet from churches and parks and light industrial areas, libraries, and K-12 schools. Also, they must be 500 feet from daycare facilities and parks not in light industrial areas. Although the facilities are dispersed heavily on the western and eastern border of our city, the disbursement still provides a great amount of convenience to our residents interested in purchasing recreational marijuana. It is interesting to note that while the city of Mesa has a population of 509,000 residents and has 13 dispensaries, the city of Tempe, Chandler, Gilbert, and Queen Creek account for a population greater than 700,000 with only 12 dispensaries. We should also remember that Prop 207 allows residents to cultivate up to 12 plants per household where at least 2 adults reside. So why is it important to consider a dual license restriction? Currently, there are approximately 130 medical marijuana dispensaries in the state. The early application period will allow medical marijuana establishments to apply for recreational marijuana licenses. It is anticipated that not all medical marijuana dispensaries will apply for recreational marijuana license. The estimate is that approximately 100 medical marijuana dispensaries will apply for a recreational marijuana license. This will leave 30 available licenses and ultimately another 26 social equity licenses. The cities and towns of Gilbert, Chandler, Scottsdale, Avondale, Queen Creek, Paradise Valley, Surprise, and Tempe have indicated a move towards restricting recreational marijuana establishment to simply dual license facilities. If the cities and towns are successful in passing their ordinances and the city of Mesa does not, we would be in a position to absorb a disproportionate number of recreational marijuana establishments. From a public safety perspective, this would strain our existing public safety resources. As stated, the Mesa Police Department has been working on the impact of Prop 207 in anticipation of it being approved by the voters. One of the resources or sources of information have been the Denver Police Department, who have already gone through a trial and error period in dealing with the legalization of recreational marijuana. We felt by reaching out to Denver that we could learn from those lessons. The city of Denver is approximately 33% larger than the city of Mesa. This is offset by the fact the metropolitan Denver population is about 45% less than the population of the metropolitan Phoenix area. With the transient population not being confined by city limits, this means there's a significant larger population in the metro Phoenix area that will be affected. Again, the proposed ordinance was crafted in a way to address public safety concerns that we learned from the city of Denver and the Denver Police Department. So Prop 207 prohibits a person to smoke in public. It prohibits consumption of marijuana or marijuana products in a vehicle, and allows business owners to prohibit or regulate marijuana or marijuana-related product consumption on their property. Our ordinance would restrict the following. As mentioned, we would restrict single license recreational marijuana establishments and only allow those establishments to exist as a dual license with medical marijuana facilities. It would restrict the medical marijuana, prohibit marijuana testing facilities within the city of Mesa. It would also prohibit marijuana use, sales, and possession of marijuana on city property. It would prohibit recreational marijuana deliveries, prohibit consumption of marijuana on private property where notice has been provided, and prohibit consumption of marijuana in vehicles. Those penalties are petty offenses punished by fines only. This is a quick overview of the proposed ordinance, and would like to open it up for questions at this time.
Thank you, Chief Rankin. Council, questions on this presentation? Councilmember Duff.
I understand the concern about possibly having too many recreational facilities, too many licenses within Mesa if the surrounding cities prohibit it or keep it just to the medical marijuana facilities since they only have a few. But aren't we limited in Mesa to only have a medical marijuana facility, thus being able to hold a recreational license, one per every 10 pharmacies, like Walgreens and CVS pharmacies? So we can't have an unbalanced number of marijuana facilities in Mesa if we have to hold to a quotient of one per every 10 pharmacies. Isn't that correct?
So Mayor and Council, I'll take that question. So the pharmacy concept is that it's not a limitation on the city of Mesa. It's a limitation on the number of licenses within the state. So what this proposition does is says that there'll be a license for a recreational marijuana dispensary for every 10 pharmacies. I actually contacted the department of the board that involves pharmacies, and there's 1,333 pharmacies in the state of Arizona as of Monday of this week. So there's 133 potential recreational licenses. And so those can be dispersed. Now there are some other limitations. There's what I'll call the small or there are some limitations within Prop 207 on the dispersion, but that won't affect Maricopa County in the sense that, or City of Mesa, and so we could still end up with a disproportionate number. Just as you've seen right now, if you pull up the Department of Health Safety and look at the CHAWS within Mesa, you'll see also that the dispersion across Mesa and within the CHAWS is disproportionate. Two of our CHAWS have 4 dispensaries, where all the other CHAWS have either 2 or 1 within them. So it is still possible. But your point, I think, is also this, is that there's a limited number of future additional recreational only dispensaries because of how Prop 207 is worded. And I think that is true. And the number it gets, that's sort of a tangent that goes for quite a while because there's a number of subsections, but the number of sort of new recreational only licenses is a limited number. And we've tried to calculate sort of a guesstimate, and based off the numbers I was able to get Monday, I have a new sort of guesstimate, but it is a limited number that'll be statewide, but it's not unique to Mesa.
And also without Tempe and Phoenix, we don't see any movement from them, nor do we anticipate them to take on any prohibitions as though we're proposing, and Scottsdale and Gilbert already has. Given the size of their cities and populations, we're certainly not the only place that the distribution could occur. Also, we have 120 pharmacies, I guess, in Mesa, and about 12 or 13 medical facilities. So I think the state has taken into consideration on the distribution of licenses in the past. I don't really expect suddenly we have a disproportionate number of recreational licenses awarded to Mesa.
Mayor and Council, if I could, I've got some recent information. Chandler next week is going to consider, so let me back up for a second. It is Scottsdale, Gilbert, Fountain Hills have adopted substantially similar ordinances that are before you. It comes from the league. It's a model ordinance. Chandler is considering that next week. My understanding is Tempe later this week, their staff is going to recommend adoption of a substantially similar ordinance later this week. And so I don't know ultimately what will be adopted in those cities, but that's the sort of the current proposal from their staff also.
Is there any legal concern regarding the medical marijuana facilities only possessing the recreational licenses, therefore monopolizing the market? Where it's not a free market, it's not an open market, you're not allowed to be a new business to be able to get into that market. In fact, I am very concerned. They are already powerful. They put in a huge amount of money, the medical marijuana facilities, the large companies, huge amount of money into Prop 207 to ensure its passage. And it's characteristic that it was written that they had first dibs on recreational licenses. I just worry that we're empowering them even more to be able to have influence. And it's not about marijuana, it's about any entity of businesses that have tremendous influence on legislation. Anyway.
I guess that was one of the arguments against Prop 207, and the voters apparently weren't persuaded. It obviously is an interesting. There was one of the arguments was it does offer a monopoly on these types of stores to those who are already in the business. So that apparently did not concern the voters enough that they voted against it. But Mr. Smith, to Councilmember Duff's question about. Roughly, we have about 13 dispensaries as it is, which is about a tenth of the number of drugstores that we have. If that's the ratio that we want to go by as to what's the right proportion. As you indicated, statewide, we're eligible for another 100, or many more. But when these licenses are given out by the state, are they exercising some discretion and saying, well, you know what, we kind of like the number that Mesa has, so we're not going to issue 50 more licenses in Mesa? Or is there any indication that that's the rulemaking, or what discretion, if any, is going to be utilized in awarding licenses?
So Mayor and Council, we don't have that information yet. It's one of these where the law goes into effect, and in fact, they have to start taking applications next month. So they're going to be taking applications probably before they even have their regs out. And so you're not going to really know that answer until maybe at the same time as you start to see the licenses actually issued. So is that a possibility? It is a possibility. Is it possible that they use some sort of alternative CHA method for dispersion? It's possible. I don't foresee them using the exact CHA method that they use for medical marijuana licenses, because there's so many CHAs in the state of Arizona that have no dispensaries. And so it seems to me that they wouldn't use that methodology again, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Smith, what is a CHA, if you can spell that out for us?
Yeah, it's CHAA, and it's Community Health Analysis Area. And it wasn't created for marijuana. DHS actually created it for the study of diseases, and so they could see if there's a higher rate of particular diseases in different areas of the state. Whether there would be a spike in cancer in a particular area, and then they would study it in greater detail. But when the medical marijuana proposition passed, they utilized that also to create dispersion of the licenses. But then what they did is allowed licensees to then relocate after a certain period of time, and so that's what's been happening over the years. And what's happening now is you see the relocation of these dispensaries to the population centers within the state. And so if you go to their website, you'll see a number of CHAs that are large CHAs in the whole areas of the state that have no dispensaries, and you'll see them focused on all the population centers, and that's where they end up going. I would also like to say, because Mayor, it is true that if you do the sort of the math of the 10% percent of 1,033, that it ends up with 133 licenses. But to be fair, my reading of the legislation, and I've talked to industry lawyers also, and also lobbyists that have been involved in it, is that the idea is that every time one of the existing medical marijuana dispensaries gets a co-location licenses, that will use up one of those recreational marijuana licenses. And so it's not as if we're going to end up with 133 more recreational license. That's at least my interpretation of the legislation. I think many other people have that interpretation. And so a number of these licenses are going to be used up by the sort of right out of the gate in January and February of next year for the dual licenses. To just be fair that, you know, ultimately I think that number is going to be substantially less than that. And so whatever that number is, and there's a number of different estimates, you know, anywhere between 10 or 20, or maybe slightly more than that, that will be left over. And then you add on to it, there's another subcategory of 26 social equity licenses that will also be ultimately be given out to. So it's somewhere with that kind of number that you're looking at, sort of total new recreational only facilities within the state.
Mr. Smith, is it not also true that there's opportunities for additional medical dispensaries? So if you go with the 26 social equity licenses on top of the, say, 20 additional licenses authorized for the formula you talked about, so we're talking 46, 45-ish. But then on top of that, is it possible there'll be additional medical dispensaries issued as well?
I guess it is possible. If they issue more medical, you'd wonder if they'd also come in immediately as dual and use sort of both licenses at the same time. So I'm not sure if it'd ultimately net out two separate facilities or just one facility. The other point that you know that's sort of related to what you just said is it's also possible in the future that more medical marijuana dispensaries relocate to the city of Mesa. So you also have to look at that possibility. One of the benefits of this ordinance and one of the intents of bringing it to council was, one, for consistency with all the other municipalities that are adopting this, and it's also through the state. There's a longer list throughout the state too. We haven't bothered to give you the ones throughout the state. But it also provides additional time for planning to do a more detailed analysis and look at the zoning code and as far as the dispersion. And so you can see how they are predominantly in the east and west part of the city because that's where our industrial zoning is. And we'll probably need to do an analysis to look at sort of how many do we reasonably expect medical marijuana dispensaries to come into the future with our current separation requirements, and see how that number alone, how will impact the city before you also add in the possibility of recreational only. And this ordinance sort of really, it prevents the recreational only licenses, just like all those other cities we've listed, and then allows the planning department also to do more detailed analysis and come forward, you know, sometime in the first quarter or thereafter of next year with a more detailed analysis as far as some changes with the zoning code. So this isn't just, ultimately this is just sort of maybe the first and primary ordinance, but we'll see some other ordinances come through next year also.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Duff, continue.
I'm sorry, I'm taking up a lot of time on this, but the way I understand it is currently we have 100, statewide, there's 130 medical marijuana license issued. And the Prop 207 is increasing that by 30. And of that 30, 26 are social equity licenses. And to remedy what they call pot deserts, where there's no dispensaries for like 25 miles, which is most likely in a lot of rural areas. In fact, I saw an article from Rose Law Group that said the act carves out an additional 26 licenses to be granted to ensure that rural communities are well served under the social equity ownership program. And then ADHS has 6 months to roll out that social equity program and issue those licenses. So immediately, the applications are for the medical marijuana facilities to apply, right, in January, and they expect to be able to sell maybe in March or April, something like that. But if you take out of the equation the 26 out of the 30, and I mean, we're talking about 4 licenses for the entire state that are non-social equity licenses for recreational, above the medical and marijuana.
Mayor, so I got some and I got this information Monday, so I know directly from DHS. As of Monday, there was 121 medical marijuana dispensaries. There's 133 potential licenses. The difference is 12. And so that's the difference, plus the 26 additional licenses that are the social equity. And so I would, if I were to guesstimate, and if my reading of the proposition is correct, and DHS applies in that same way, I think that's sort of the available license, the 12 license plus the 26 licenses. There is sort of the set aside. It's sort of the marijuana deserts, or whatever phrase you want. It's an interesting, so that those counties that have 2 or fewer dispensaries also have a set aside. So there's some counties that have 0 or 1 dispensary in the entire county. And so there's a subsection that deals with giving those counties, at least they get at least 2. And so that's like a separate provision. I'm not sure how DHS is going to read that provision in relationship to all the other provisions, whether it's a total separate set aside or if it's within the other numbers that we've just discussed. And so, the sort of the marijuana desert provision is specific to those counties that don't have 2 or fewer dispensaries.
Yeah, but my point that I was trying to make is the social equity licenses, Mesa won't be part of that allocation.
So I don't read, so I can read you the whole thing of the social equity. It's 1 sentence. And so the fact that so the social equity licenses specifically can go anywhere within the state. The set aside licenses for the counties that have 2 or fewer, those have to stay within those counties. The social equity licenses can go anywhere within the state. So I'm not sure where the concept, and the social equity licenses, it says the creation to implement social equity ownership program, promote ownership and operation of marijuana establishments and testing facilities by individuals and communities disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of previous marijuana laws. That sentence occurs twice within the proposition, and once it asks for DHS to create regulations based off that 1 sentence.
Okay, so I guess time will tell, but right now, it'd be your best reading of that, Mr. Smith, to say that the 26 social equity licenses could go, some of those could end up in Mesa. Is that consistent with your reading of the initiative?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the program isn't going to be written for another 6 months, so it seems quite premature, actually, that we're making a judgment on it, which we don't know what the rules are. Other than it's supposed to be in, these areas that don't.
And Mayor,
All right,
and Councilmember, I think that's a fair point.
Heredia has a question. Let's go to him.
Hey, Mayor, thank you. Hey, Jim, do we know, based on current ordinance and separation requirements, how many medical, or I know the rules have been for recreation, but medical marijuana facilities can be in addition here in Mesa in the future? Do we have that number or an estimate?
I don't, and I know that's it's part of the process in which we're actually passing this ordinance. Will give planning additional time to look at that and that possibility of where all our industrial property is now, where maybe some industrial property might also be in the future. And once you do that sort of analysis, especially on the east side where the property is very spread out. And so you're going to be able to meet those separation requirements and potentially get more medical, which will then be dual licensees coming within the state. And so we do intend to bring that back to council in the future.
But for right now, based on the current ordinance and separation requirements that we do have, we don't have any number of additional medical marijuana facilities that can be in Mesa.
No, I believe we could still have more come in. We're not sort of topped out or somehow prevented. I think it's pretty tight on the west side of the city because of just sort of the spacing. It's getting tighter on the west side, but through other areas, I think they're more able to come into the city. And realize, one of the interesting thing about the city of Mesa, when we originally passed the medical marijuana ordinance within our zoning code, we allowed it by right within our industrial zoning. You have to meet certain separation requirements, but it's by right. Other cities put other requirements like equivalent to a council use permit or some permit process. And so, well, we don't have that. And so, we were trying to facilitate sort of the process and also put it in an appropriate zone so we didn't have to have an additional layer of processing. But now we're looking at it, you can see how we have 13 medical marijuana dispensaries within the city of Mesa.
Okay. Thank you, Council. Additional questions, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess, in conjunction with the concern of more facilities popping up in Mesa, I think I'm probably more concerned about the safety of our community. And it's kind of appalling that, if I'm sitting at a red light and all of a sudden decide that I'm going to break out my bottle of Jack and take a sip and an officer sees me, that's a misdemeanor crime. But if I'm sitting at a red light and all of a sudden grab my joint and decide to light up, it's a petty offense. And to me, you're still driving under the influence of a drug, whether it's alcohol or whether it's marijuana. And it just, and it's unfortunate that the language is now law in 207 and can't be changed, because I don't think it's really, I think the language is really hampering our ability to protect our citizens, or hampering our public safety officials' ability to protect our citizens. And it's an atrocity waiting to happen. It's sad, but that's all. Just my commentary.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Council, other questions on this item? Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. I support moving forward with this ordinance to, put at least the co-sharing of the two, medical and recreational marijuana in these facilities. I guess, Mr. Smith, or maybe legal from police, the downside is if we didn't do anything tonight, what would be the ramifications of that?
So I'll take it, Mayor and Vice Mayor, and this is why you're seeing a number of cities do it sort of at the same time, is about 14 years ago, this exact same number, Prop 207, was passed by the voters, and that was the private property land use proposition that council is very familiar with in the context of zoning. And so one of the concerns is that if you wait to pass an ordinance with this prohibition and someone gets a license or maybe even applies for the license, that they then will file a lawsuit under that proposition claiming that they had a land right to utilize it in that way. And because the licensing is going to, these initial licensing, not the social equity licensing, but the other licensings are going to occur probably in the first quarter of the year, you're seeing the cities now all pass this. I'll point this out. There's multiple other defenses to that type of claim, so I'm not trying to say that's sort of a winning argument on the industry side, but that's the concern that the cities are working under and seeking to have their ordinances passed. A couple cities have actually made it with emergency provisions, so we haven't done that. I don't think that's necessary.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to tag on to Councilmember Thompson's comments. I'm concerned about, you can have the legal possession up to 2.5 ounces, I believe, of marijuana. If you're over 21, an individual can grow 6 plants. The two of you can grow 12 plants. You can exchange marijuana. I mean, this is something that we're going to have to grapple with as a community. I'm sure this is going to be a big learning curve, and kudos to our police department going to Denver and vetting some of these things out so that we can create an ordinance. But I applaud crafting an ordinance that's similar to other communities around us, so that if any litigation were to come down the pike, then probably all of us would have to fight the battle together. But again, I think by issuing the licenses at the medical marijuana facility, at least gives us a game plan and allows us, you know, our public safety to roll out and have to deal with it, our hazardous materials component. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to look at for the future of our community. So with that, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councilmember Luna.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. I'm also in agreement. I think that we need to have something in place before we know that it's been passed. We are not preventing people from getting access to marijuana. We're trying to create a systematic way of distributing it and giving it to our community members. So I'm going to be in support of the ordinance and staff recommendations. I appreciate our public safety personnel going to Denver, figuring out what was good and what was bad, and trying to ensure with this new ordinance that is a positive thing for our community in terms of the way we roll it out. So I'm going to be supporting staff recommendation on this.
Thank you, Mr. Luna. Mr. Whitaker.
Hey, John, I got a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Can legal confirm, is it in fact a petty influence to be driving while under the influence of marijuana?
So
Let me, oh, go ahead. I did want to provide that clarification. So if in fact a person is driving under the influence, it still would be a Class 1 misdemeanor. So in the scenario provided by Councilmember Thompson, if the individual had not been previously consuming marijuana and was not under the influence of marijuana at that time, but sparked up at that moment, we would still have to show that there's impairment to the slightest degree. So it'd either be charged under the DUI statute or it'd be charged under the ordinance. So depending on how long the individual had smoked the marijuana would really depend on the investigation, where we go down a DUI investigation or the charge under this ordinance.
But the offense would be similar to DUI. I mean, you have to prove the same exact things that you're proving if you pull somebody over under the influence of alcohol, and the ramifications are exactly the same, if I understand correctly.
You understand correctly.
Okay, perfect. The other question that I have is, what are the anticipated lost sales tax revenues if we, limit the recreational sale of marijuana in Mesa?
I don't think we have, Mayor and Council, we don't have an analysis. Also, whether or not you get lost sales through not having more facilities, or if the existing facilities simply sell more.
Okay, and my other question for PD is the comment that, or the ordinance that prevents people from taking edibles or vaping marijuana in public parks. How is there, I'm not familiar with this, is there a testing procedure to determine if edibles contain marijuana or if a vaping pen contains marijuana or tobacco? Because I'm not under the impression that you can discern edibles from food or vaping marijuana versus vaping tobacco.
Mayor, Councilmember Whitaker, you are correct. It certainly would be difficult to discern at that time. So the field contact, there would have to be other indicators. There would have to be, quite frankly, an investigation, a conversation with the individual. Ultimately, the lab could test for THC, but to actually be able to do it in the park and to make that determination in the field that in fact that the edible contains a concentrate from THC would be very difficult.
I understand. Okay, so it could be derived from, to your point, simply a conversation from the individual and them for whatever reason, admitting that there's marijuana in their vape pen or their edibles versus any type of actual testing that might occur.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, perfect. I don't have any other questions. I'd like to request that this be taken off of consent if it's not already. And, you know, I just think that when we talk about recreational dispensaries in Mesa, you know, I think we should push back on ourselves and say, well, clearly these organizations have to be profitable. And if they're building recreational distribution facilities within our city, then that's where, you know, the desire to consume is, right? And so, you know, if we really wanted to make an impact on this, let's go after the root cause of, for whatever reason, convincing people that they shouldn't be consuming marijuana. But, you know, I look at this as a, you know, as a good thing. You know, people that consume marijuana, or if somebody decides to go and get high rather than you know, go and drink and drive or consume alcohol, you know, I mean, we sell alcohol on every single corner, every Circle K, every liquor store, every grocery store. And so, you know, to somehow think that, from my perspective, that this is really going to do anything, then, you know, I'm concerned about that. And then the other issue is that the locking in of the monopolies of these dual dispensaries, or these medical companies now that have basically cemented in the community and making it relatively impossible for an entrepreneur or an individual to you know, create a recreational dispensary. I mean, we shouldn't forget at the end of the day that the voters voted for this with a something like a 20-point margin, right? It's not as if individuals in our community have the same sentiment as we do, as if this is like, you know, 20 points is a huge margin, even with the existing, you know, concerns within the bill, or, you know, the monopolies and the other things that we spoke of. So I'm going to request this be taken off of consent. And, you know, I just think that seems like overreach to me.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Okay, agenda item 6B will be off the consent agenda, but again, the item on the agenda is just to set a hearing for a week from tonight. It's not voting on the merits of the ordinance. But I believe there are also some blue card requests from the public to speak on 6B, so I think we were anticipating it would come off of consent, so at a minimum, the blue cards can be read. I'll weigh in a little bit. I think, let me be clear, we're not relitigating Prop 207. Prop 207 passed, and nothing that is being proposed in this ordinance is inconsistent with what the voters have approved. Prop 207, in fact, some of the tenets of Prop 207 were that there would be local control. Recreational marijuana would be legalized, but there would be local control. And so what we're doing in this process is very consistent. In fact, it's exactly what the promoters of Prop 207 argued was one of the reasons why we ought to vote for this. As has been noted earlier, Mesa currently is not a marijuana desert. We have 13 medical marijuana dispensaries. That is more than the rest of the East Valley combined. And the reason for that, as Mr. Smith indicated, is because we have taken a non-political approach to issuing licenses for medical marijuana dispensaries. If you ask for a license and the zoning is correct, you get it as a matter of right. There's no council use permit that's required. So as a result of that, Mesa has, compared to other communities, a lot of existing dispensaries that will become recreational dispensaries as well. I have been talking to Mr. Smith over the last day or two, again, trying to grapple with the question that we were asking, Councilmember Duff was asking earlier, how many more licenses might we expect would come to Mesa if we don't adopt this ordinance? And I think it came out earlier that we really don't know. There's the 26 social equity licenses that would go statewide, and a possibility of another 10 to 20 licenses that on top of that would go statewide, and the possibility of more medical dispensaries that could come to Mesa as well. I guess the concern would be that if Gilbert and Chandler and Scottsdale that we know of so far opt out and aren't eligible for any additional licenses, does that put unusual pressure on those licenses being bundled into our community? I tend to believe that it does. I think these licenses are going to be very lucrative. I think these businesses are going to make a lot of money. And so there will be pressure on be very competitive. People will be trying to get as many of these licenses as they can. And if we think that there's a lot of check cashing stores or other types of businesses in Mesa on every street corner now, I'm fearful, what might happen if we are the one city in the East Valley that doesn't have any type of regulation on additional licenses. I think that the code that we're proposing is important for several reasons. That we all need to update. Every city in the state needs to update their code to be consistent now with 207, and I think that's a big part of what we're doing here. Again, but let's be clear, there is no public smoking of marijuana allowed under Prop 207. So that's not allowed, never will be, never was. But we do need to address use of marijuana in public spaces like parks. And so that's part of this ordinance. There remains some unaddressed questions. The vaping question has not been addressed yet. And so we will need to come back to council in the next few weeks or months to address to what extent vaping of marijuana is something that we're going to regulate. Also, do we want to address zoning related to these businesses? So I think, the question was asked earlier, are we moving too quickly? Are we acting in this situation before we need to? I guess my answer would be, I hope so, because I don't want to act too late, because as Mr. Smith indicated, once these licenses are issued and there's a property right that attaches to them, the cow is out of the barn. And even if we do want to be thoughtful and think that our community can, in a healthy way, accommodate additional dispensaries, it would be out of our hands at that point. So I will be voting tonight to introduce, to conduct a public hearing next week. Look forward. I'm sure we'll have additional public comment at that time. But for the reasons indicated, I think it is appropriate for Mesa to join with these other communities so that we're not don't become a magnet for this industry in our area. Okay, yes, Councilmember Duff.
I don't want to beat this to death, but I would like the city to look at, with the separation requirements that we have in the city, it is my understanding or my belief that the maximum number of additional facilities we could have, it'd be 2 or 3 in our city. So that is a consideration when we think of, are we getting what we think the outcome would be? Also, I had a question for Mr. Smith. I know the delivery of marijuana is restricted until 2023 in the Proposition 207. For us to have in our ordinance some restriction regarding that. And then in 2023, the state allows it and writes their requirements, the rules about that. Then which one, does the state preempt the city, or what happens in that situation if you have 2 opposing rules?
So Mayor and Council, so there's a number of, I'll just say, inconsistencies within Prop 207. I'll also highlight within one section, it's 36-2857A6, and it specifically says a locality may prohibit or restrict delivery within its jurisdiction. And how we've read that is we're restricting the delivery of recreational marijuana, but when DHS comes out with its guidelines on delivery for medical marijuana, that will be permitted. And so we believe that's consistent with the intent. And so that the idea is if you need it for healthcare reasons and you're not able to go to the dispensary, you'll be able to have it delivered to you. But if it's merely recreational, you're going to have to go to the dispensary. And so I think that's So, and we'll look forward to see DHS regulations, and I'm hopeful that that's consistent with what they regulate in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith and Jen, I'd like to join with Jen in urging staff to address the question that Councilmember Duff raised a moment ago. And I know we've talked a lot about that tonight, and the answer has been, we don't know. But if a week from tonight at the public hearing, if we could get the best educated answer to that question, I think we would all appreciate it. Potentially, how many more licenses would come to Mesa if we don't move forward with the ordinance?
Mayor Council, so I just got information from our GIS analyst who just did kind of a buffer around the existing ones that we have, and he just told me that we have the potential of having a maximum between 3 to 4 with our distance requirement as it stands now.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nana. Again, I'll be voting for this to go forward, and I look forward to continuing this discussion at the public hearing, assuming there's council support for having a public hearing a week from tonight. All right. Believe it or not, we're still discussing the items that we're going to talk about later at our council meeting. Council, are there any other questions regarding the agenda for tonight's regular council meeting?
Mayor?
Yes. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I think you did ask a question regarding agenda item, was it 7B?
B.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have a short presentation on it, if you want.
Thank you. Please proceed with telling us what you can about agenda item 7B, Mr. Brady or Nana.
Okay, Mayor Council, so basically the main changes that we're doing with item number 7B is to include separation distance requirement for assisted living facilities, assisted group homes, and then let me just bring it up. Yeah. So there are 3 categories: assisted living facility, assisted living home, and then assisted living center. Right now, we do not have separation requirements for those uses. And also our discussion with council for the past year is to really come up with requirements for them to be located outside our prime arterial or road intersections. So our recommendation right now is for them to be set back 600 feet from major intersections, and also for each one to be separated with a minimum distance of 1,200 to minimize over-concentration of those uses. I know from my discussion with the Vice Mayor, one of the questions that he's been asking, and I know Council has been asking, is community residents, which is group homes typically for 10 or less, and also those, well, we call them group homes, but basically they are typically classified as single residents, as people living in those houses that are 5 or less. Those are categorized as community residents, and that is not part of this discussion tonight. However, we've been working on this for the past 2 years, and our goal is to bring that ordinance before council in January. So we are working to complete that, and I know from discussion with the Vice Mayor and some of the residents in District 1, they are really looking forward to that ordinance coming before council. So we will be bringing that before you as soon as possible, definitely likely in January.
And Mayor, if I may, I did request that from Nana and the planning department to help minimize that impact and help staff understand the concentration of those type of businesses or homes within our neighborhoods. So thank you for doing that. And I look forward to the presentation on it.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I know other members of the council have share your interest in having tighter control over these businesses. Thank you. Okay, council, any other questions regarding tonight's agenda? Yes, Mr. Heredia.
Yeah, on item 5A, just I might have missed this, but on the mental health collaboration program, as far as embedding clinicians, the clinicians that we're talking about, are these additional, or are these or additional, and what type of clinicians? Are these social workers, or what type of clinicians are we looking at for this team, or are they already in place? Just wanted to get more information on that.
Sure. These are, Mayor, Councilman Heredia, these are to support our community resource team that already is from the police department, that already is assigned to address these calls, and now we're adding additional resources. Like you said, someone with a mental health behavior experience to be available to assist them on their calls.
Are these part-time or consultants, or are these full-time employees that we're adding?
It's a grant, so I don't know that they're not our employees. So this is the mental health. Those individuals that'll be assigned to the CRT, are they coming from an agency, or?
They're coming from CPR, they're a local organization that provides crisis counselors. So they're currently embedded with our crisis response team and assist on mental health related calls.
And just a follow-up question to that, Mr. Rankin, are these is this agency, have they done other work with police departments in the past, or I'm assuming there is some sort of vetting for this agency?
Mayor and Council Member Heredia, we have worked with the CPR and the crisis counselors for many years. As a matter of fact, this would be a renewal grant to expand the current problem. We've been extremely happy with the work that they provided and the services that they provide to people suffering from mental health within the community.
I appreciate
it. Okay. Thank you, Council. Any other questions or need for any additional presentations on anything on our consent agenda tonight? All right, thank you, Mr. Brady. Does staff have anything else they'd like to say about anything on the agenda tonight?
No, Mayor, I think we've completed all our presentations.
Okay, thank you. We'll proceed then with the agenda for this study session. We will, and unless there's an objection from council, we'll handle agenda items 2 and 3 together so we can have one roll call vote. Agenda item 2 is approval of minutes from a previous executive session, and agenda item 3 is acknowledging receipt of various board minutes. Is there a motion to approve both of these items? Thank you, Mr. Freeman, seconded by Councilor Luna. We'll now do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Freeman, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Whitaker.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Heredia.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Duff.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Luna.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you. I vote aye as well, so that motion passes unanimously. Item 4 on our agenda for this meeting is the current event summary and reports on meetings and conferences attended. Council, I know you've been busy. Who would like to share first? Councilmember Luna.
Thank you, Mayor. Today, you and I attended a historic wrap dedication over at Falcon Field Airport of the control tower. The video will be shown on Facebook as well as the airport website. And it's a great wrap because it commemorates the women that helped during the World War II, the RAF fighters that were trained here at Falcon Field. So I was honored to be there and to participate in that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Luna. Yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful wrap. I think people will, it looks like about a 19-year-old high school graduate, a young lady working on a World War II airplane. It's a great, huge mural. So look forward to, if you haven't driven by Falcon Field, you really need to take that in. Council, other things you'd like to share? Councilmember Duff.
Yes, I'd like to welcome everybody to Merry Main Street in downtown Mesa. I attended a tree lighting ceremony with the mayor and Councilmember Freeman, Vice Mayor Freeman, Councilmember Thompson, and Councilmember Luna to kick off the season with Santa. So the schedule is on the website. It's on the weekends, basically, that you can bring your children, and it's all safe. Santa has on his shield, as well as he's behind a plexiglass snow globe. And so a lot of great photo opportunities for Instagram and everything to celebrate the season with your family. Also, I walked downtown and did a little shopping on Saturday for Small Business Saturday. I'm glad to see people supporting our small businesses in this difficult time and still being safe on our main street. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Duff. Great summary of the Merry Main Street. The only thing I would add is the ice rink is open every night until 10 p.m., 5 to 10 on weekdays, and I think noon to 10 on weekends. And because of the COVID restrictions, it's just important that you log on early and reserve a spot because we're only having 50 people on the ice at a time. So please utilize the ice rink, but make sure you log on to make those reservations. Thank you for bringing that up, Councilmember Duff. Council, other announcements you'd like to share with us? I'll take an opportunity to just mention, I don't know if this can go unsaid or not, but obviously we are once again finding ourselves in the midst of a real COVID upsurge. I've read that, in the last day or two that Arizona health experts are predicting that we will max out on our hospital capacities this month. That means we will surpass, the seriousness that we were experiencing at the end of the summer, this summer. So I just would like to take the opportunity to urge the members of our community to please act responsibly. If we want to keep our schools open, if we want to keep our restaurants open, if we want to continue to have opportunities for our children to participate outside and in activities, it's important that we all get very serious about observing the safety guidelines. There have been questions raised about whether or not our community ought to allow activities like outdoor youth sports. And the answer to that question will depend on how we as a community respond to the challenges that we're facing right now. I think we all desperately want our children to stay in school. We all desperately want to have these activities and these businesses available to us, but if that's what we want, we really need to step up and do our best to stop the spread. I have had the opportunity to talk with our school superintendents over the last couple of weeks. They are very concerned about the spread of the illness in our schools, but kids are not, what they're telling me is that our kids are not getting sick at school. Kids are getting sick at outside school activities, at sleepovers, and at informal, unauthorized winter formal parties, and mass gatherings that people are not doing a good job of social distancing and wearing masks at. I just want to remind the community that the governor's executive order is that if there is a gathering in our community in excess of 50 people, and it's not protected by the Constitution, meaning it's a church service or it's a political gathering, those events need to receive authorization from the city to go forward, and meaning you have to give the city a plan as to how you're going to do that in a healthy way. So again, it's time for us to take this again very seriously and do all that we can to limit the spread of the virus so we can continue to have our schools and our businesses open. Thank you for letting me get on the soapbox a little bit there. Council, any other events or current event summaries or announcements you'd like to share with us? Mr. Brady, what does our future meeting schedule look like?
Thank you, Mayor. We would normally have a study session scheduled for this Thursday, but since we covered the agenda for the December 8th I don't see a need for having that meeting on December 3rd. So we will not have a study session this Thursday. Also just want to remind the council, I did send out to you today the details on kind of an agreement that we have as far as employee compensation going forward that we discussed last week. So we were able to come to a, I think, an understanding. And so I've provided that details to you. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read it. If not, just please read it and give me a call if you have any questions. We'll be sharing this with the rest of the staff this week so they can know what to expect to happen at the beginning of January. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Yes, Councilmember Thompson.
I was going to reiterate again my thanks to Chris and staff for looking at the compensation and for our employees. I think they're very deserving. And I just wanted to say thank you again, publicly acknowledge my thanks to you for working with staff on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Luna, and seconded by Mr. Thompson. We'll do this on a voice vote. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned. I'm going to suggest that we hit the pause button for 5 minutes before we run the video to begin our next meeting. But that meeting will commence here in another 5 minutes when we roll the video. Thank you.